the wind of the cold palace always carries a bit of chill, passing through the broken window, scraping it on a human face like a knife. Lin Zhiqing wrapped her old robe that had been washed white, sat on a wooden bench with no corners, staring coldly at the pottery bowl in front of her. A small pinch of dark brown medicine was filled with a faint bitter smell in the bowl. She stretched out her slender, rough fingers, swayed the powder lightly, and pulled out a few unpredictable sneers at the corner of her mouth. This place is called a cold palace, but it is actually a broken yard. The corners of the wall were covered with moss, and most of the tiles on the roof fell off, and they leaked like squids when it rained. Once, she was the most respected woman in this Great Yao Kingdom. The empress's crown was used to bring her down, and the civil and military officials of the court were bowed to her. What about now? The family was scribbled, she was deposed, and her like-minded residence was gone, and even the little palace ladies who gave her food could sneer at her. She remembered that when she was taken to the cold palace that day, Emperor Zhao Cheng carried the eyes of both horns, and the proud smile of concubine Su Wanrong beside him. The smile was like a poisonous snake spitting out a letter, which made her heart feel cold. "Humph, Su Wanrong," Lin Zhiqing murmured softly, with deep hatred hidden in her voice. She clenched her fingers, her nails almost pinched into her palms. How did Lin Zhiqing be calculated to this point by that woman who was born in a small household? She is unwilling to give up. Her Lin family is full of loyalty and kindness, but she is charged with rebellion and has no chance to seek justice. And Zhao Chengxuan, the foolish monarch who was unpredictable and angry, was willing to sacrifice anyone for his power, and even the person who had once lived could be abandoned. She vowed that one day she would make these people pay for the price and make the entire palace tremble with her humiliation. She looked down at the bowl of medicine, and the eyes flashed for a moment. This medicine was made secretly in the cold palace these days, using inconspicuous grassroots skins, and even poisonous worms crawling over the corners of the wall. She was once the queen, had studied a lot of medicine, and knew poison, but in order to cure Zhao Chengxuan that year, she never dared to show her skills. Now, this has become her only trump card. This poison is colorless and tasteless, and can kill people without knowing it. As long as she can find a chance. Squeak! The broken wooden door was suddenly pushed open, and a cold wind rolled in, bringing a sharp voice, "Empress, I'm sending you a meal." A little palace lady in a coarse cloth walked in, holding a broken wooden plate in her hand, and a bowl of porridge that could reveal the shadows and a hard black aphrodisiac. She called Empress with a slight lingering voice, and glanced at Lin Zhiqing with her eyes as if she was looking at something dirty. Lin Zhiqing didn't move, and sat there still, her face as cold as ice. She knew that this little palace girl was Su Wanrong's man, and she showed off her power in front of her every day. She opened her mouth lightly, let it go. The little girl curled her lips and threw the plate on the table, and the porridge was poured out. She clapped her hands, as if she was feeling dirty in this place, and muttered in a low voice, "It's so obscene. I have to run away when I serve a waste." Queen Mother said, "Let me remind you not to think that hiding in this cold palace can be at peace, and you will always cry." After saying that, she turned around and left, with all the doors closed. Lin Zhiqing looked at the bowl of porridge, her eyes getting colder. She picked up the black horn and took a hard bite. It was as hard as a stone, almost hurting her toothache. But she didn't spit it out, and she chewed it and swallowed it. She knew that now was not the time to show off her strength. She had to live, and only by living can she revenge. She hid the bowl of medicine in her sleeves, stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the gray sky outside. Far away, the gold top of the palace felt hidden in the mist. It was once her world, and now it was her land. At this moment, a slight movement suddenly came outside the yard, like a sound of footsteps, and deliberately lowered it. Lin Zhiqing's eyebrows snaked and quickly retreated to the corner of the wall. Her hand had already touched a pointed wooden thorn hidden in her sleeve. Although this cold palace is remote, it is not entirely uncommon. Occasionally, there will be too much supervision or palace girls come to take care of her, but the sound of the steps is too strange, unlike the people in the palace. "Who is there?" she whispered, with a cold voice, with unquestionable majesty. The sound of his foot stopped, and after a moment, a low voice came from outside the door, "Don't be nervous, I'm not from the palace." As the voice fell, a tall figure pushed into the door, bringing a cold wind. The man was wearing a coarse black cloth coat with a piece of rag wrapped around his head, like an ordinary slut, but the breath emitted from his body made Lin Zhiqing nervous in an instant. It was a sense of danger and pressure, like a wild beast that would come up at any time. She held the wooden thorn tightly and looked at the visitor with her eyes fixed on her face. The man was tall and cold-faced, with a long scar on his left face, extending from his eyebrow bone to his chin, looking particularly slim. His eyes were very deep, as if he could see through people's hearts. When he stared at Lin Zhiqing, he had some inquiry and excitement. "Who are you? What are you doing?" Lin Zhiqing asked coldly, without any panic in her voice. Although she was in a down-and-out position, the former queen was still there. Facing this stranger, she did not show any timidity. The man curled the corner of his mouth and showed an unknown smile. "It doesn't matter who I am. What's important is that I know who you are, Lin Zhiqing, the Queen Mother." There were a few sarcastic comments in his temperament, but his eyes were very sharp. "I came here not to find trouble, but to discuss cooperation." "Cooperate?" Lin Zhiqing narrowed her eyes and her brain moved quickly. She didn't know this person, nor did she know where he dared to enter the cold palace and tell her this. But I just told her that this man is not simple, and may even have something to do with the power outside the palace. She sneered. "I am just a waste now, what's worth working with?" The man did not rush to answer, but turned around casually in the house. His eyes swept over the broken tables and chairs and the spider nets in the corners of the wall, and finally stopped on Lin Zhiqing. He said in a low voice, "Don't put it on, Lin Zhiqing, I know you are unwilling to give up. Your Lin family's door has been destroyed, and you can't just forget about this account after you turned from a queen to a waste. And I also have an irreconcilable hatred with this court. The enemy's enemy is a friend. Are you right?" Lin Zhiqing's heart was shocked, and her face was not filled with voice. She stared at the man and tried to ask, "Who are you? What do you think I will believe you?" The man smiled and finally reported the name. "My name is Liefeng, and people outside the palace may have heard my name. The court's helping dog officials like to call me a rebel leader." When he said this, his language was filled with slander and hatred, as if he mentioned the court and made him stubborn. Lin Zhiqing's pupils shrank slightly. Strong Wind? She heard this name. When the Taishu palace girl in the palace discussed it privately, she always said that he was a demon who could kill others without blinking. She carried a rebel army to kill and plunder in the border. The army sent by the imperial court to suppress the bandits was beaten to pieces by him. Unexpectedly, such a person would appear in the cold palace and stand in front of her. "What do you want to fuck me?" she asked straightforwardly, not having the time to circle him. Xiao Liefeng didn't say anything, and opened the door to see the mountain. "I want to overthrow the dog emperor Zhao Chengxuan to let this Great Yao Kingdom change for a day. And you should want revenge too, right? I heard that when the Lin family was destroyed that year, it was not just the emperor's hand behind it, but many people also helped. If you want revenge, it's not enough to rely on yourself. How about we join forces?" Lin Zhiqing was silent. She knew that what Xiao Liefeng said was right. She was alone in the cold palace and had no chance to leave the yard. Why should she revenge? But she also knew that this man was not a good man, and working with him was nothing different from being a tiger. But if she didn't cooperate... She lowered her head and looked at the medicine in her sleeve, and a burst of hope ignited in her heart. Or maybe, this is an opportunity. "What can you give me?" She raised her head, her eyes cold and sharp. "What do I want to believe you won't pass the river chamber?" Xiao Liefeng raised his eyebrows, as if he was satisfied with her reaction. He took out a small iron card from the bottom and threw it on the table. "This is my token. Hold it, my subordinates outside the palace will recognize you. The first step in cooperation, I can help you send news and contact some of your Lin family's old offices that year. As long as you click, my people can arrange it at any time." Lin Zhiqing looked at the iron card and didn't rush to reach out to get it. She knew that once she got out, she would never be able to get back. But does she have a choice? She has nothing, and the only way is to revenge. Okay. She finally opened her mouth, her voice low and determined. I will cooperate with you. But I have the conditions that Zhao will bear the life, and I will take it at my own hands. Xiao Liefeng was stunned for a moment, and immediately burst into laughter, with a low and cheerful voice. Okay. Let's calculate this account slowly. I like to deal with people with great qualities. Lin Zhiqing, I hope you don't disappoint me. When the two looked at each other, something invisible was colliding in the air. Lin Zhiqing knew that from this moment on, her fate had changed. She held the iron card in her palm, felt the cold touch, and a sneer appeared on the corner of her mouth. Zhao Chengxuan, Su Wanrong, you wait. One day, I will let you kneel in front of me and beg me for my life. At this time, in the imperial room far deep in the imperial palace, Zhao Chengxuan was leaning against the dragon chair, playing with a jade ruby in his hand. His face was so deep that it could drip out of water. Waste. Zhao Chengxuan suddenly smashed Yurui to the ground, making a crisp sound. A group of buckets cannot catch even the robbers, and they dare to come and cry with me? Tell the band army leader that he could not catch anyone within 3 days, so he came to see. Li Defu was busy and sweated heavily on his head. He knew that the emperor had such a temper, and he would turn his face when he said he would turn it on, and no one dared to say anything more. But he thought secretly that the palace has not been peaceful recently, and there were some sounds coming from the cold palace, saying that he seemed restless after the wall was gone. He glanced at Zhao Chengxuan and said in a low voice, Your Majesty, there is another thing. The Ling Palace seems to have some minor actions recently. Should I send someone to check it? Zhao Chengxuan snorted coldly, his eyes cold. What kind of waves can a waste person make? Let her go and win. Anyway, her life will belong to me sooner or later. He snatched his hand and signaled Li Defu to retreat, his eyes growing stronger and stronger. At the same time, in the Pine Palace, Su Wanrong was tracing her eyebrows at the copper collar, and a smug smile was hanging on the corner of her mouth. The palace girl beside her said in a low voice, Empress, I just heard that someone is going to deliver the food in the cold palace. Look, do you want to give her a look again? Su Wanrong smiled lightly, put down her eyebrows, turned her head to look at the palace girl. What are you anxious about? That guru is now a waste. Keeping her can also make the palace more happy. When the palace sits in this back seat, then slowly clean up her. Her smile was sweet, and her eyes were as cold as ice, making people feel cold. The night in the cold palace became deeper and deeper. Lin Zhiqing sat by the window, holding the iron card in her hand, and her eyes were far away towards the direction of the palace. Her path to revenge just began, and this path was sure to be full of blood and tragedy. She murmured in a low voice, Zhao Chengxuan, Su Wanrong, let's take a look. The cold night in the palace was as thick as ink, and the cold wind poured in from the broken windows, with a biting heart. Lin Zhiqing sat on the wooden bench that was about to be buried, holding the iron card left by the Liefeng in her hand. The cold touch made her heart clearer. She knew that after this night, her life would change completely. Outside the window, the golden top of the far palace seemed to be hidden in the moonlight, as if she was mocking her down and out, but her eyes were more stable than at any time. A few days passed, and the fierce wind did not appear again, but Lin Zhiqing was not in a hurry. She knew that people like him must be cautious in their actions, and even if the cold palace was broken, no one was completely unscrupulous. She had to wait patiently, and at the same time, she was not idle either. During the day, she put on a pair of unrestrained appearances, lowered her eyebrows and dealt with the palace ladies and the stern men who came to deliver the meals. At night, she quietly dug out some inconspicuous grass roots in the yard, crushed them and boiled them into medicine. There are not many poisonous drugs on her hands. If she really wants to do it, she must ensure that there is no loss. In the evening of this day, a dim light appeared in the sky, and the sound of footsteps came out outside the courtyard. This time, the stranger was too thin, as thin as a bamboo pole, with a smirk on his face and shouting in a sharp voice, Empress, I am ordered to come and convey a word. Empress knew, please come over and say that there is something to discuss. Lin Zhiqing felt nervous and her face was not full of voice. She stood up slowly, patted her old robe covered with dust, and looked at the prisoner coldly. Empress Nuan is looking for me? Ha, when did she start to care about me, a wasteland? That too smirked, with a little bit of good intention in his eyes. I dare not say this, Empress Dowager is kind-hearted and heard that you have been in a cold palace and want to help you. I'll just tell you, and follow me obediently, so don't let Empress Dowager wait in a hurry. Lin Zhiqing lowered her head and remained silent for a moment, and her brain moved quickly. Su Wanrong would never have any good things to look for her. She probably wanted to humiliate her or put in some traps. But her current situation will definitely make herself more passive. It would be better to go and see what she wants to play. She raised her head and said lightly, "Okay, let's take the way." The monitor seemed to have not expected her to answer so happily. She was stunned for a moment, then grinned and made a request. Lin Zhiqing followed him, walked out of the broken courtyard of Lung Palace, and followed the palace road toward the direction of the Fengzhou Palace. On the way, a palace girl occasionally came over and showed a surprised and contemptuous look when she saw her, and she was talking about something in a low voice. Lin Zhiqing was silent, just walking with her head down, and quietly clamped a small bag of medicine hidden in her sleeve. It was hidden before she left, and whenever there was something wrong, this was her life-saving trump card. When we arrived at the Bird Palace, the fragrance in the hall came over, making people feel a little depressed. Su Wanrong was leaning against the couch, wearing a gorgeous palace dress, with a golden bead hairpin on her head, and a delicate makeup on her face, smiling softly and sweetly. She saw Lin Zhiqing coming in, sat up straight, and said softly, "Yeah, sister is here, hurry up and sit down. Have you been in the cold these days? I heard that you have a hard life and I really don't want to go. I specially asked someone to prepare some things for you." Lin Zhiqing looked at her coldly, without answering or sitting down. She knew that behind Su Wanrong's hypocritical appearance, the hidden goodwill was definitely not goodwill. She asked directly, "What is the matter with Empress Nu who comes to me? If there is no serious business, I will not be with you." Su Wanrong was stunned for a moment, then covered her mouth and smiled slightly, as if she had heard something funny. The palace maid beside her also laughed, and the atmosphere became a little strange for a while. Su Wanrong snatched her hand and signaled the palace girl to step down, then slowly opened her mouth. "Sister is still so angry, no wonder she fell into this field that year. I'm looking for you, I really want to say something, I heard. The cold palace has not been peaceful recently, and someone has sneaked in and out, do you know?" Lin Zhiqing's heart thumped, and her face was calm. She knew that Su Wanrong was trying to find out that she was probably hearing some voice, maybe you saw what happened to Lily Feng. She sneered and asked, "What does Empress Nuan mean? The cold palace is so broken that there are mice that don't want to go. Who will run there? If someone really comes in and out, I'm afraid the news about Empress Nuan is more spiritual than mine." Su Wanrong's smile froze, and a chill flashed in her eyes. She stood up, walked up to Lin Zhiqing, and said in a low voice, "Sister, don't be stupid with me. I kindly remind you, don't think that hiding in the cold palace can make you stable. If you really have something to do with someone you shouldn't come, don't say it's you. Even if you have any trouble, I can dig out the ruins of yourselves to let your majesty know. At that time, don't blame me for being cruel." Lin Zhiqing looked her eyes straight into her eyes and said, "If concubine Gui really has any evidence, you can tell your majesty directly, why bother with me here? If there is nothing else, I won't keep it." After saying that, she turned around and left without giving Su Wanrong the opportunity to open her mouth again. After walking out of the pizza palace, Lin Zhiqing's back relaxed slightly, and her palms were covered in cold sweat. She knew that Su Wanrong called her this time, just to hit her, so she looked at her reaction. But this also shows that the incident of Liefeng may have revealed some voices. She must speed up her movements, otherwise she will be caught by Su Wanrong and the consequences will be unbelievable. Back to the cold palace, it was completely dark. As soon as she pushed open the yard, she heard a low voice coming from the darkness, "It seems that your life is really uneven. Lin Zhiqing was shocked suddenly and turned around and saw that Liefeng was leaning against the corner of the wall, still in the inconspicuous coarse cloth, with a smile on her face. "Why are you here again?" Lin Zhiqing whispered softly and quickly closed the yard, her eyes filled with quilts. "You can't enter this place at will. If someone finds out, we will all be done." Liefeng sang aloud and said indifferently, "Don't worry, I've cleaned it up before coming in." No one followed. He walked to Lin Zhiqing and said in a low voice, "I heard that concubine Nu is troubled with you. Why are you planning to endure it?" Lin Zhiqing snorted coldly and said unhappily, "I can't bear to do anything. Now I can't even get out of this cold palace. Could it be that I can still rush into the bird palace and strangle her to death?" She turned on and asked again, "What's wrong with you coming here? Don't tell me you're here to see me laugh." Xi Liefeng smiled and took out a letter from her, and sent it to her. "This was sent by my people. It was some old lists of your Lin family back then. Most of them are obsessed with their names now, but as long as you are willing to come forward, they will still hear you. I came here just to ask you, what are you planning to do next?" Lin Zhiqing received the letter and her fingers shook slightly. She opened the envelope and glanced at it in the faint moonlight. It turned out to be a few familiar names, her father's most trusted subordinate that year, and she didn't expect that they would still be alive. She put away the letter and looked up at Liefeng. "Can your people contact them?" "Of course." The fiercely stormed a little, with a bit of confidence in his language. "As long as you give me an accurate speech, I can arrange for them to enter Beijing and even help you out of this cold palace. But the premise is that you have to have a clear plan. We are not just talking about it, but I have to see your ability." Lin Zhiqing was silent for a moment, and the fast disk was counting in her brain. She knew that Lai Wen was trying to see if she had the ability to become his ally. She said in a low voice, "Okay, I can plan for you, but I want to leave this cold palace first, otherwise I can't do anything. Can you help me?" Xi Liefeng raised his eyebrows, as if he was satisfied with her answer. He pointed, "Okay, in 3 days, I will arrange for someone to pick you up. But you have to prepare well. If you leave the cold palace, you have to follow my people, leave the imperial palace at a time, and hide in a safe place before talking." "Leave the imperial palace?" Lin Zhiqing glanced at her eyebrows, feeling a little hesitant. Her goal of revenge was Zhao Chengxuan and Su Wanrong, leaving the imperial palace, not leaving them even further? But she also knew that when she stayed in this cold palace, she would always be a wasteland who was beaten. Only by going out can she have the chance to turn over. She gritted her teeth and said, "Okay, that's it." In the next 3 days, Lin Zhiqing was still dressed as if nothing had happened on the surface, and even lower tuned than usual. She took care of the girl who sent her to pick her up. She secretly packed up a few items she had, hid the package of poison and a few bottles of medicine on her body, and prepared to move at any time. On the night of the 3rd day, as the wind said, a slight knocking sound came from outside the courtyard. Then a black shadow flashed in and said in a low voice, "Empress Lin, I am the leader of the head, and I will take you away now." Lin Zhiqing didn't ask much, she clicked a little and followed the man out of the yard quietly. The man was obviously very familiar with the terrain in the palace. He took her through several remote paths to avoid the patrol service, and finally arrived at a secret corner beside the palace wall. A rope was ready under the corner of the wall, and the man whispered, "Climb up, someone outside will answer." Lin Zhiqing bit her teeth tightly and grabbed the snail and climbed up a little. Her palm was so painful that it was rubbed by the rough snails, but she didn't say a word and climbed to the wall. After turning over, I saw several people in black waiting there. One of them was Liefeng. He saw her coming down, clicked a little, and said nothing more, but said in a low voice, "Let's go, don't waste time." The group quickly left the palace, took advantage of the night to pass through several alleys, and finally arrived at a broken carpet outside the city. There were already more than a dozen Hanzi waiting in the sacred Sang. When they saw the sacred Sang, they all respectfully lowered their heads and shouted "Head." Liefeng took Lin Zhiqing into the house and said in a low voice, "This place is safe at a time. You can rest first. I will take you to see a few people tomorrow." Lin Zhiqing lit up her head and sat on the wooden chair in the room, finally relaxing her breath. She knew that leaving the palace was just the first step, and next, she had to regain her efforts and formulate plans to truly start her revenge. But she also knew in her heart that she would always be wary of being betrayed when she worked with someone like Liefeng. She lowered her head and looked at the iron card in her hand, and a sneer appeared on the corner of her mouth. No matter what, Lin Zhiqing would never let herself be someone else's pawn. At the same time, the imperial palace had already exploded. The next morning, the guard of the cold palace found that Lin Zhiqing was missing, and the news soon reached Su Wanrong's ears. After listening to the palace girl's report, she looked blue and slapped the table suddenly. "What a valet, you really dare to run away. I want to see where she can run." She turned to look at Taisho on her side and said coldly, "Go and tell Li Defu, let him send someone to investigate, and he must find the person. Also, don't let your majesty know about this. If he starts to ask, he will say that he is seriously ill after the death and move to another place to take care of it." Taisho was busy and hurriedly retreated. Su Wanrong sat on the couch, her eyes as cold as a poisonous snake. She knew that Lin Zhiqing had run away, and she was definitely not just escaping her life, but probably because she was hooked up with someone. She bit her teeth tightly and murmured in a low voice, "Lin Zhiqing, you'd better not let the palace catch you, otherwise, I will definitely make you live worse than death." In the ruins far outside the city, Lin Zhiqing was listening to a cracked map and explaining the surrounding terrain and force distribution. Her eyes became more and more calm, and her fingers knocked on the tabletop lightly, and said in a low voice, "Since you have come out, don't waste time. Fierce wind, where should we start next?" Liefeng looked at her, with a flash of appreciation in her eyes, and immediately grinned. "Okay, then start with the old part of your Lin family. When we have personnel, we will slowly draw. One day, the sky of this great country will be transformed into ours." When the two of them looked at each other, an invisible spark seemed to ignite in the air, and the plan to revenge began. The fire and the broken blade swayed, reflecting Lin Zhiqing's face flashing in dark. She tapped her fingers on the yellow map, and glanced over the small towns and villages marked on it, where her Lin family's old part was hidden. Next to it, Liefeng leaned against the wooden chair, playing with a short knife in his hand, and the blade flashed with cold light under the burning light. He glanced at Lin Zhiqing and said in a low voice, "These people are scattered in a mess. It's not that easy to gather together. Are you sure they will hear you?" Lin Zhiqing raised her head and smiled coldly. "They were my father's subordinates that year, and their loyalty was engraved in their bones. As long as I am still alive, they will not forget the kindness of the Lin family." There was an unquestionable confidence in her temperament, as if she had already been confident. Zhao Liefeng raised his eyebrows and said nothing more, but just pointed, "Okay, then we will start with the nearest Qingshi town. My people have heard that there are a few old subordinates of your Lin family who are now lying under their names and doing some small business. We will move early tomorrow morning." The night became darker and there were only occasional sounds of horns outside the carp. Lin Zhiqing lay on the hard wooden bed, her eyes closed and she was sleepless. Her brain was filled with humiliation and hatred over the years, and every step she had to take next. She knew that the road to revenge would not be smooth, and although Liefeng was an ally, his ambition was no less than her. If she was not careful, she might become a pawn in his hand. But she has no choice. Only by holding the code in her hand can she survive in this game of power. The next day, as soon as the day was dawn, the group packed their bags and rode a few thin horses toward the Bluestone town. On the way, Xiao Liefeng's subordinates whispered a low voice to discuss the court's recent movement, saying that the Ban army was searching 4 places outside the city, probably to capture her as the escaped waste. Lin Zhiqing heard it and a sneer came out from the corner of her mouth. Su Wanrong, do you think you can feel at ease if you catch me? Wait, I will let you know what real hope is. The Bluestone town is not big, and there are some old men on both sides of the street, with pedestrians sparsely scattered, experiencing a scattered veil in the world. Lin Zhiqing followed the fierce wind to an inconspicuous small winery, with a rag sign hanging at the door, and wrote Lao Wang's dining store on her head. After entering, a middle-aged man with a face full of beard was sitting behind the cabinet and rubbing the winery. When he saw them coming in, his eyes changed slightly, and he immediately put on an indecisive manner and asked, "How many guests? Are you going to be the best or stay in a hotel?" Without saying a word, he took out a piece of iron cards from the inside, put them on the cabinet, and said in a low voice, "Old Wang, don't put it on, we are here to find you." The man was stunned for a moment, his eyes fell on the iron cards, and his face became solemn in an instant. He put down the wine box in his hand and asked in a low voice, "Are you, the leader?" "It's me." Zili was at a loss, and Lin Zhiqing was revealed from the side. "This is the person you really should see." Lin Zhiqing took a step forward, lifted the cloth towel covering her face, revealing a pair of cold eyes. She looked at the man directly. Her voice was low and determined. "Uncle Wang, do you still remember me? I am Lin Zhiqing." The man's pupils suddenly shrank, as if he had seen a ghost, his lips were trembling, and after a while, he said, "Miss, is it really you? Are you still alive?" His eyes suddenly turned red, as if he had recalled something, and he knelt down suddenly. "Old slave Wang Zishan, please see Miss." The Lin family was in trouble that year, and the old slave was incompetent. He could not protect Lao Yu and his wife. He should have died of death. Lin Zhiqing looked at him, and a complex emotion flashed in her eyes. She reached out and helped him up and said in a low voice, "Uncle Wang, you don't blame me for the past. Now that I'm back, I want to make those who harm my Lin family pay for the price. Do you want to be with me?" Wang Zishan wiped his eyes and pointed his head. "Miss, I have never had my life. It is my blessing to be able to serve the Lin family again. I followed my brothers and I had also buried my names here nearby. As long as the lady gave an order, they could get together at any time." In the next few days, Lin Zhiqing and Liefeng turned into several small towns, and found more than a dozen old members of the Lin family. Although these people have lived their ordinary days, they heard Lin Zhiqing's name and were excited and expressed their willingness to follow him on the spot. Although they are not many, most of them were fighting against the hard sands of the Lin family that year, and their fighting power cannot be underestimated. With the rebels under the command of Liefeng, a small-scale team has gradually taken shape. As time passed, Lin Zhiqing's strength was getting stronger in secret, and at the same time, she did not forget her poison. Every time she came down, she would take time to go to the mountains to pick up some herbs, cook poison and antidotes, and these things might be put on a big shot. When Liefeng looked at her busy figure, he occasionally showed a look of appreciation, but more often, he kept a distance, as if he deliberately did not get too close to each other. Half a year later, Lin Zhiqing and Liefeng's army had begun to take shape, and even attacked the Imperial Grass team several times in the border, severely slashing the Ban army's atmosphere. The news was transmitted back to the Imperial Palace, and Zhao Chengxuan smashed several jade artifacts with great enthusiasm, and ordered additional troops to be sent to suppress the bandits on the spot. Su Wanrong became more and more uneasy. She felt that Lin Zhiqing's misunderstanding was absolutely inconvenient, and might even be related to these rebellions. She sent people to inquire in private, and at the same time spoke in front of Zhao Chengxuan, saying that she might confront the rebels after the siege and must be captured as soon as possible. On this night, Lin Zhiqing and Liefeng were discussing the next plan in a copycat. On the map, the location of the Imperial Palace was marked with a large red circle, and there were also the names of several key characters: Zhao Chengxuan, Su Wanrong, and Li Defu. Lin Zhiqing pointed to the red circle and said coldly, "If you drag on it, it will be even more difficult for us to start. I think we will attack directly into the Imperial Palace while they have not completely reacted." Liefeng looked at the eyebrows, obviously a little hesitant. "Attack the Imperial Palace? This is not a small fight. There are a lot of band soldiers. Our current troops will only be in trouble for 2 attempts." He decided to do it and said, "Besides, the terrain of the Imperial Palace is complex. It is easy to get in, but it is difficult to get out. Are you sure you want to take this risk?" Lin Zhiqing sneered, took out a small bottle of black medicine from her sleeve, and shook it lightly. "Fight hard? Who said I want to fight hard? As long as this poisonous medicine is mixed into their diet, No matter how many band soldiers are, a large piece of it will have to fall down. By then, your people are responsible for the frontal control, and I will take it from the side, and I will take it with you. Liefeng looked at the bottle of medicine, his eyes changed slightly, and he immediately grinned. Okay, you woman is really cruel. I like to cooperate with cruel people. Tell me, when should I do it? Just these few days. Lin Zhiqing's eyes fell on the map, her voice as low as ice. I have been waiting for this day for too long. A few days later, the imperial palace was preparing a grand banquet, saying that it was to wish him the reward for his contribution to the bandit suppression. The palace was filled with lights and singing and dancing, and I didn't realize that the crisis was approaching. Lin Zhiqing had already purchased several taishang who were responsible for purchasing ingredients through the strong inner line, and mixed poison medicine into the wine and dishes used for banquets. This poison is colorless and tasteless, and it develops very quickly. As long as the poisoned person becomes angry or striking, the toxicity will quickly dissipate and there is no medicine to relieve it. On the night of the banquet, Zhao Chengxuan sat on a dragon chair and looked at the singing and dancing below with a deep face, obviously in a bad mood. Su Wanrong sat next to him, and kept saying some sweet words in a low voice, trying to make him happy. Lin Zhiqing was wearing a palace maid's clothes, mixed in the crowd, holding the plate with her head low, and her eyes were coldly locked on Zhao Chengxuan. She knew that the poison had been cured and she was just waiting for the time to arrive. Sure enough, halfway through the banquet, Zhao Chengxuan suddenly covered his chest and coughed with a blue face. The Taishu next to him hurriedly stepped forward to help him, but found that black blood had emerged from the corners of his mouth. Su Wanrong was shocked and hurriedly called you medical, but after you medical checked, her face turned pale and said, Your Majesty. This is poisoning, the poison is too strong, and I can't do anything. The hall suddenly formed a group, and the forbidden troops came in to protect them. I found that many soldiers also began to fall, which was obviously poisoned by the same kind of poison. Su Wanrong screamed and pointed at the person beside her and tried to find the poisoned person, but when her eyes swept over the crowd, she suddenly froze on a palace lady standing with her head down. Her eyes were so familiar that it made her heart chill. Lin Zhiqing. Su Wanrong gritted her teeth and shouted out this name, with shock and hatred in her voice. She stood up suddenly, pointed at Lin Zhiqing and shouted, Catch her. She is the poison vengeance. Lin Zhiqing raised her head, sneered at the corner of her mouth, and took off the cloth towel from her head, revealing her clear and cold face. She looked at Su Wanrong directly, her voice was low and she mocked, Miss Concubine, I haven't seen her for a long time. How could I still recognize her when I saw me like a waste? Zhao Chengxuan heard this sound and raised his head reluctantly, his eyes filled with shock and anger. He covered his chest and shouted, You dare to come back. Come and grab her, I want to fight, you. Before he finished speaking, he vomited another mouthful of black blood, and his whole body fell on the dragon chair, his breath getting weaker and weaker. Lin Zhiqing walked forward slowly, and looked straight at Zhao Chengxuan without even looking at the forbidden soldiers and palace men around him. She said in a low voice, Zhao, do you still remember how I was deposed by you and how I was humiliated by you that year? My Lin family is full of loyalty and kindness, and you have been charged with rebellion, and blood flows into a river. Today, I am here to get back to this debt. She took out a dagger from her sleeve, and the blade flashed coldly under the burning light. Zhao Chengxuan looked at the dagger, and a trace of fear finally appeared in his eyes, but he had no energy to speak, so he could only watch Lin Zhiqing approaching step by step. At this moment, a sound of murder suddenly came from outside the hall, and the fierce wind rushed in with the rebels and started a fierce battle with the forbidden army. The chaos in the hall was even more intense. Su Wanrong screamed and wanted to escape, but was grabbed by Lin Zhiqing and the dagger was placed on her neck. Don't be moved. Lin Zhiqing said coldly, without any emotion in her voice, Su Wanrong, you have to stay your life today. Su Wanrong's face was pale, and she begged for a trembling voice, Lin Zhiqing, if you let me go, I will give you everything. I can speak to you and help you with your rights, as long as you give me my life. Her voice was filled with fear, and there was no more than the past. Lin Zhiqing sneered, and the dagger exerted a little force, and a blood mark appeared on her neck. Help me? Su Wanrong, are you a third-year-old child? Have you been hurting me so much in the past few years? Today, I just let you get tired of it. After saying that, she stopped swaying, and her hand was raised and the knife fell. Su Wanrong's scream stopped abruptly, and blood was pouring all over the floor. The forbidden troops in the hall were gradually being controlled by fierce people. Zhao Chengxuan was dead with anger, and only a cold body was left on the dragon chair. Lin Zhiqing stood in the middle of the hall, covered in blood, her eyes swept over the ground in mess, and there was no wave on her face. She knew that from this moment on, she finally completed her revenge, but this power of the imperial palace did not satisfy her. The fierce wind walked over and the body was covered with blood. The scar became more and more intense under the light. He looked at Lin Zhiqing and said in a low voice, "Congratulations, Empress Dowager, from today on, this Great Yao Kingdom is yours." Lin Zhiqing turned her head and looked at him with her eyes chaotic. She knew that there was a test and ambition in the words of Liefeng. She held the dagger tightly in her hand and said lightly, "My Wei Feng, this world is not my only one. Let's work together to this point. What do you want to divide the matter next?" Zi Liefeng was stunned for a moment, and then burst into laughter, with a low and cheerful voice. "Lin Zhiqing, you are not a light that is easy to save money. Okay, how can the world be divided? Let's talk slowly. But I remind you that it is easy to sit on this throne, and it is not that simple to hold it." Lin Zhiqing didn't answer, but turned around and walked to the dragon chair and sat down quietly. The cold chair, like a biting ice, made a hollow appear in her heart. She knew that revenge was just the beginning, and what she had to face was a greater storm. The tigers in the country were coveted, the court officials were in a state of storm, and the tigers that might be backfired at any time. But she was not afraid. Lin Zhiqing, who has long since walked from Ling Palace to this day, has long put life and death aside. The shouts of murder outside the hall gradually subsided, and the rebels began to clear the war scene. The night in the imperial palace was still deep, like an ever-changing ink. Lin Zhiqing sat on the dragon chair, looking far away to the hall, and an unknown smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. Her story is still not over.